That's right. I would address your introduction with another question. Is the world ready for Russia continuing to exist as a nuclear empire? We are talking in Germany very much about the risks of changing status quo, but nobody is talking about the risks of preserving the status quo as if there is now. The German political way of thinking was based for decades on a very stable security and economy situations, which gave generations of German elites a false feeling of security by no moving. We were on such a stable concrete panel funded practically by NATO and mostly the US, but not only the US military presence in Europe, by cheap Soviet and later Russian resources, first and foremost gas since the 1970s, and later market for our products mostly in China. And that led, but first and foremost, the military component of military security led to false understanding or false belief that when we don't move, it will not get worse. It will not be better, but we are fine enough. But if we move out of this position, the world outside is dark and risky. We are afraid of the terrors of darkness outside of our Christmas celebration party. And we don't want to go there without our mama and daddy, who are the Americans. So this idea led to false belief that when we try to act, and actually in the last years Germany was called for actions, and there were sayings by Polish government officials that they are more afraid of weaker German army than of a strong German army. And when the Ukrainians, who experienced German tanks in the worst way possible, because once again there are two nations who suffered most from genocide unleashed by the German Wehrmacht and SS. There were Poles and there were Ukrainians. And if you look carefully into the protocols of the Wannsee conference with the plans of elimination of Jews, there were 2.4 million Jews planned for extermination in Poland and 2.26 million Jews planned for extermination in Ukraine. Ukraine was extra mentioned in Wannsee conference protocols, despite being part of the Soviet Union. So when Ukrainians asked the Germans to send their tanks to Ukraine, that should have been celebrated in Germany as the ultimate sign of trust. But instead of that, instead of repaying finally, ultimately our debts towards the Ukrainian nation for extermination attempt in World War II, with 30,000 Jews being killed in one city in Kiev in Babin Yar massacre, the largest massacre on Jews in one city in the whole World War II, Holocaust before the decision of Holocaust on Wannsee Conference. Instead of repaying that debt, we have decided not to move. The same happened with an open letter by the Jewish communities from Ukraine addressed to Olaf Scholz in early February 22, before the full-scale invasion, when the ancestors of those survivors of Holocaust asked Olaf Scholz to send guns. And he never even answered that question, which is for me, a German citizen, was unspeakable. So, back to that. When we think that not doing anything is better than doing something risky, will the situation get worse? Of course. Because Ukraine cannot fight this war alone for us, even with that limited support, military support from our side, which gets slower and slower and smaller.